have our next panel. Oh, first thing, lunch is going to be shorter, but you can always eat where you're sitting. But we do want to keep going and make sure everybody hears the maximum, okay? Get the maximum out of every single panel that we've organized for today. And our next panel is on opportunities and verticals. Our speakers include Katie Digovich, CEO of Minutia, Marco Loba, CEO of Catena, Jess Krieger, CEO of Ohio Valley. Did I say that right? And it's going to be moderated by Gino Segre. He's the managing director of Maker Labs. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. It's a distinct pleasure to be able to host the SelectUSA spinoff meeting today. As Darlene said, I'm Gino Segre. I'm managing director for Maker Labs, so I'm responsible for some strategy and operations. I've actually been working on this program for nearly 5 years. I wanted to switch gears today, and I wanted to bring in some of the current 10th company leadership and give you a chance to see up close and personal what's important to them. This morning we talked a lot about the different resources available. Certainly, we have a lot of on offer, and Fiona Baugh talked earlier about the kinds of programs that the state of California is providing as well. But getting the perspectives directly from our current CEOs in place, I think will give that a more nuanced view about what's important to them. So just a few words about Maker Labs. I know you've already heard bits and pieces here and there, but I think one of the things that I want to stress that's important here is elements of diversity that really come from the scale of the operation here. And I think the diversity elements come in a number of different ways. If you're looking at it by the numbers, companies here vary from pre-seed, seed to Series A. On average, companies here today have raised about $5 million, and a couple of them actually have raised more than $50 million. So a bit of diversity there in the financial spectrum. Many of the CEOs, they range in their experience and in background and in perspective. Some of them are first-time CEOs, and some of them this is not their first rodeo. Perhaps the team sizes today are 2 people to 20 people. And really, though, the most important element, I think, of the diversity piece here is the range of technologies. So in a moment, I'll go ahead and introduce my fellow panelists. Really what's important here is that breadth that the California bioeconomy can host and what we can host within our incubator space. Today, Maker Labs hosts about 25 companies, as you heard from Dave. Many of them are therapeutics, but we're also in other research technologies and market verticals, so food and ag. So let's dive into a bit about what that diversity looks like. I'd like the panelists today to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their companies and really what's so exciting about it. So we'll start off with Jess Krieger of Ohio Valley. Jess.
I am Jess Krieger, Dr. Krieger. I'm a cultivated meat scientist. Has anyone in here heard of cultivated meat before? Yeah, so lab-grown meat. So I dedicated my life to creating environmentally sustainable solutions for animal agriculture. So we create these alternative proteins that are derived from cows, and we create cell lines, and then we combine those skeletal muscle and fat cell lines together with plant-based meat to create a cultivated meat product. So we're still a small team here. We have a team of 5, but we're very excited to join the Maker Labs incubator and the resources that they've provided to us.
Thanks, Jess.
Thanks. My name is Katie Digovich. I'm CEO and a co-founder at Minutia. Minutia is working on a functional cure for type 1 diabetes, which we accomplished by transplanting insulin-producing cells such trial here at UCSF. And this is a mission that is deeply important to me personally. Type 1 diabetes is a condition that I've been living with for over 25 years. I have a really amazing team now, 11 folks with 2 different core backgrounds. Engineers that work on helping the transplant succeed and ways to evaluate the graft niche, and then cell biologists that make really well-performing insulin-producing cells that are hypoimmunogenic.
Awesome. And I'm Marco, the CEO of Catena Biosciences. We are a spin-out from work here at UC Berkeley. I did my PhD in Jennifer Doudna and at Francis Labs, and we discovered a tool for assembling therapeutics. There's been some discussion about kind of the rise of immuno-oncology as a major therapeutic modality, and we basically enable the construction of this next generation of therapeutics. Think of antibody plus additional proteins, cytokines, antibodies, or other immune interfacing molecules. We allow the assembly of these complex therapeutics that are basically impossible to manufacture using current technologies. And our team is currently at SEP here at the Baker Lab.
Thank you all for that introduction. So I thought we'd dive into, just for a few moments, a better understanding about why startups such as yours are choosing to locate in the Bay Area. What are those resources that really speak to you and that help your company to grow? And by the way, if you have questions, I do want to address questions from the audience at the end of our panel, so please be thinking about them. So, well, Marco, you've got the microphone. Go for it.
For us, it's there's the Bay Area-wide system is just a wealth of talent. That's always the biggest challenge for companies. Like I think all 3 of us have related to that. Is even in the Bay Area, it's sometimes hard to find people with the exact skill set you're looking for, and going elsewhere preferred is very, very niche skill sets that we all need. There's a couple cities in the world that have the diversity of talent that we have access to here, and so that's, I would argue, the biggest driver for where we chose to locate. The second factor is, of course, the support network. I mean, the systems of support that are here. We are much closer to all of the resources for Berkeley's campus. There's some amazing technology here on campus that we have access to. Cell lines that are always being cultured by the Berkeley Cell Culture Facility that we have access to, so we don't have to spend 2 weeks getting a cell line back up and running. If we want to do an experiment, I just walk across campus and grab an aliquot, and by the afternoon I can start doing experiments on already healthy, adherent, dividing cells. And so there's some benefits to being here specifically at the Baker BioHub that I would say are pretty unique to compared to a lot of the other incubators that we looked at around the Bay Area.
Maybe it's the same for you. Are you looking at resources on campus or statewide resources? I think I heard a little bit earlier today.
Yes. I mean, so a shout out to the state of California, California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. We got the announcement yesterday, actually, a $1.1 million grant from CERN.
Congratulations!
We're super excited. So, and I mean, as I'm sure you guys are aware, California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, so has to have a California footprint, the company. And I think, as Marco was saying, the Bay Area is a beautiful place to live, so if the talent isn't here, I would argue it's pretty easy to attract that. A lot of the scientists that we've been interviewing are saying to me, hey, it's a goal of mine to live in California with my family at some point. So it's been a real selling point for us. And then because it is an ecosystem, it is a big pond. You're not a big fish in a small pond. You're either a small fish or a big fish in a big pond. But the great thing also with that is there are so many peers, other CEOs that you can grab coffee with, swap, fundraising stories, HR stories, give advice, cry on someone's shoulder, let them cry on yours. And I think there are a lot of ecosystems where that peer-to-peer interaction is a lot lower, especially the opportunity to do it in person, which I think makes all the difference. I also think with fundraising, being able to grab coffee with a potential investor, go
labs in an old art museum.
Yeah,
Yes.
such a cool inspirational space, yeah.
I agree with everything the other panelists have said. I do want to reiterate that the resources that we have available to us as companies at this incubator via the UC Berkeley facilities, those are one of the primary reasons that we wanted to become a company at Baker Labs. The access to the equipment, the access to the talent at UC Berkeley is just a really amazing opportunity for us as a startup. Additionally, because I'm working on something that is quite new, lab-grown meat is quite new, the Bay Area it was the first place in the world to really embrace cultivated meat from a cultural standpoint. The investors here and the culture here are very, very progressive, focused on the future, and this is the best place to be to raise money from people who have this kind of vision.
Just can you say a little bit more, I think there's, each of you are in different industry verticals here. Tell us a little bit about the cultivated meat and new food kind of landscape. And is being in Berkeley or in the Bay Area a unique advantage?
Absolutely. There's approximately 100 companies in the cultivated meat space currently. This industry has expanded rapidly over the past couple of years. Since 2015, we had our first companies in the cultivated meat space pop up. Personally, I got started about 12 years ago in the cultivated meat industry. The alternative protein space is well funded here. This is the perfect environment for it. Not just for cultivated meat, but also for plant-based meat and for other forms of cellular agriculture, if you're familiar with cellular agriculture, basically where you can just produce animal proteins from non-animal sources, such as growth from microbial cultures or plants. So this is an amazing landscape, an amazing community for the alternative protein space.
Turning to Katie and Marco, we have the same questions for you. You know, what is it about the Bay Area in terms of therapeutic landscape? I mean, Katie, you mentioned that you're in clinical trials.
So I think having so many powerhouse universities really close by, I mean, a lot of love for UC Berkeley. We also have UCSF and Stanford, San Jose State, UC Santa Cruz. So there's a lot of amazing PIs that you can collaborate with. There's also, as my co-panelists have mentioned, a lot of great talent, a lot of postdocs and grad students coming out of those labs that might be doing research in a specific area that you're focused in, and some great intellectual property. So, for example, we have 9 full field use exclusive licenses for patents from UCSF and a few other universities, but UCSF being the major one. And so the ability to build a relationship with the PIs doing that work, de-risk it, and bring it in-house was very easy to accomplish in the Bay Area. The other thing I was going to say, I want to give you a bit of a shout out because one of the pluses that I forgot to mention is actually the spectacular interns that have come into Minutia from an internship program here. These are young folks at UC Berkeley that are doing work, that have been working in research labs already that require very little onboarding in order to be able to contribute to the work that we're doing.
Yeah, we also benefit from that internship program. Excellent stuff. I would say the last piece for us, as we do have a internal pipeline that we're developing, but we are not at the phase of clinical trials yet. And so for us, one of the huge benefits is also that almost every major pharma has a representative site here in the Bay Area, mostly in South San Francisco. And so being able to meet in person with the development scientists in the Bay Area and to have that easy local access to those pharma companies for us as a creative tool for producing novel therapeutics, even outside of our internal pipeline, that has applications to many of the pharma companies in the area. And so the easy access to those companies has been a huge boost. We already have 2 proof of concept trials underway with top 10 pharmaceutical companies. That would be much harder to engineer if we were in another location.
That's great to hear. I want to follow up on a couple of comments they made, just maybe a little bit more depth here. So the summer internship program, QB3 has been running for a number of years. In short, we create the marketplace. We've got the students in advance. Folks like myself reach out to CEOs, like the ones you see here, and say, hey, do you want to have some interns? Actually, this year, through a generous state grant from the governor, office, these interns are paid. So actually, this is a material benefit to our startup companies. And of course, we expect that this is a valuable experience for those students. Obviously, actually, some of them we track actually have converted to full-time employment from past summer internship programs. So that's very gratifying. The other piece Marco mentioned, the industry connections. Of course, they're out there. We expect all of our entrepreneurs to be very proactive and reaching out to various industry partners. But QB3 has also developed its industry affiliate program. We have major pharma here today that is sponsoring and wants to be engaged and actually provide expertise. And really the promise here is that by giving that expert advice, these companies actually can have farther visibility into the future in terms of how to properly develop, how to properly partner, at least when it comes to therapeutic space. So that's 2 elements of the program. Maybe I could turn just a little bit about for each of you really about what goes on inside Baker Labs that you particularly appreciate. I know one thing that we work hard on, and I think is emerging, because we've only been open for 8 months. I think that's something we always have to keep in mind about how fast we're moving here. Really is a sense of community and interaction amongst companies. Who's got my Marco? You want to just talk a little bit about how's that serving Catena today?
Yeah, I would say that in the early days of where everyone was getting just set up, I think there was camaraderie in, oh, I haven't gotten this instrument in because COVID has shut down my supply lines. Can I get some time on a similar one that you have access to here? And so just being part of an incubator that has so many different companies in it means that there's a pretty wide diversity. If you need some specific tooling, you can probably find someone in the building that has it. And I think as it's gone on and as everyone's kind of matured in the infrastructure here in the building, what's been really cool is it's gone from just simple, oh, well, can I get 5 minutes on a centrifuge to, oh, you have this very advanced analytical capability, let's talk about how we can potentially collaborate and work together to synergize off of our different technologies. And in fact, talking at this panel today has reminded me that there's the potential synergy that I've needed to talk to you about. So, I think that's a really cool thing is just like, being able to have so much diversity of innovative research happening in one place means that the expertise around here is really phenomenal. And so if I have questions about this really obscure microfluidics thing, we've got a company working on really advanced microfluidics channels. And so that's a really, really amazing benefit to have.
Absolutely second that about the community, and let's brainstorm after this panel. Fun some time. I would say also located in the heart of UC Berkeley, there's a lot of hip coffee shops, restaurants. It's an inspiring place to be. I just have to be hammering home this point. The interns that came in were such high quality. I think we were initially a little skeptical that people would come in with the skills where they could actually contribute to the work. And every intern now is actually in the experimental pipeline at Minutia. So we have 3. And that has just been really fun to see, and these guys are maybe like 5 weeks in, I'm not exactly sure. So it came in with very relevant skill sets because they had been working in research labs previously.
I agree with everything the panelists have also said. I think the community and the culture that's here at Baker is incredibly supportive and really supports innovation. And as the others mentioned, being able to go and talk with other companies and other scientists, CEOs who have some expertise in something that you're interested in is completely invaluable. Additionally, I would also say that the staff that operates Baker is amazing. They've been incredibly supportive, very knowledgeable, and have been super helpful in us settling into Baker Labs.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all those kind words. It's really gratifying to hear. Maybe turn a little bit to, you guys are CEOs. You have a certain temperament and disposition to be driving an idea forward to reality. There's plenty of resources, but let's get real for a minute. What are the challenges of being, of being a CEO in a startup in a resource-rich environment like this? I mean, it may sound like it's a cakewalk, but for those that aren't familiar really with the Bay Area environment, maybe you can touch on kind of where you're focusing your energies and actually how you're managing those challenges today.
We actually have a good problem in that there are so many resources at Baker and at UC Berkeley that we're trying to figure out what to prioritize at this time. So we're very lucky to have these opportunities, but we also just started our research here, so I think the other panelists would be better to answer these questions, so happy to hand it off to them.
I would say, Gino knows this. So I recently welcomed my first child. She's 4 months old, and we're going through this 4-month sleep regression. So she's sleeping she's getting up every hour and a half right now. So when I'm thinking about challenges and you ask that question, Gino, I'm like, I'm just barely, barely functional, but that's not a Bay Area specific challenge. That's more a personal joy, and growing opportunity. But I would say, the cost of living in the Bay Area is high. It's a double-edged sword when we talk about this big pond in that there are some much more established companies that have made several attempts to poach some of our successful scientists already. So that's something that we've had to be vigilant about. I think that sometimes the networking, while there's so many opportunities, it can be also overwhelming, knowing which opportunities are the right ones, the right things to attend. You have to do a lot of digging, and research on the different opportunities if you want to be efficient with your time. So those are a few.
Yeah, I very much relate to the picking which networking events to go to is always a fun challenge because you're like, oh, there's happy hour, there's a cocktail, and that sounds great. Like on surface, it'd be really wonderful, but it's very rare. There's so many of them that it tends to just spread out the quality, and so like you get a couple people you want to talk to at every one, and there's not just one happy hour that you could go to actually meet everyone you want to, and so you're missing out whichever one you pick. For me, that rings really true with the crowding feature. We very much have seen the challenge in just the biotech. We were fundraising at the end of last year and into this year, and we just closed our seed round, and it's been really, I definitely the current climate for investment in biotech, I think, is a good one because there was so many companies jumping out of the woodwork with some pretty crazy ideas, and I'm glad that we're having a bit of a market correction because it was very hard to stand out from the noise because there was just so many companies pitching all the time, and there was so much money flowing around that anyone with, a half idea could get money for it. And so I think reducing the number of companies starting up is going to be a beneficial thing for the economy and ecosystem. But that's the problem with the Bay Area is you're still consistently dealing with too many companies pitching the Bay Area VCs. And so, just speaking to the group of people that are here, I think that's one of the big differentiating options that you can make is there's so many companies that they just pitch the top 10 VCs, and I think for companies that are being really serious, they should be open to investment from all sorts of different sources. And so being able to access funding that's not just from Andreessen Horowitz is, not speaking ill that they're a great investment firm, but there's only a couple companies that I think a lot of investors or that entrepreneurs go to, and I think that that's a bit short-sighted because there's a lot of value that comes, and we've benefited a lot from it's very expensive to do things here in the area because of the high cost of living. And so there is a lot of benefit of going overseas for certain work, certain production work that we've definitely benefited from.
In our personal case, our two primary investors are actually overseas. So the first is in London and the second is in Canada. So there's plenty, as was mentioned, there's a lot of competition here in the Bay for attention from VCs and investment from VCs. There would be many companies who would welcome investment from people outside of the Bay Area, like ourselves.
That's a perfect segue. Really interesting profile of the kinds of challenges here. So maybe I can open up to questions. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Mickey. I'm from Boston Consulting Group. And I have two questions. I'm not sure who to aim them at. But one question is, how involved are you, or how do you intersect with the SynBio Beta community? John Cumber's community that just hosted here in Oakland probably 5,000 people from around the world around synthetic bio. That's number one. So how do you interface with that community? And the second part is, do you have any startups or intentions to have startups that exploit biological aspects of material science? So obviously nature's one of the best manufacturers we've ever found in the universe, and a lot of things could be built with nature that turn out to be like bricks to build buildings, or new kinds of bioconcrete, or other kinds of things that are effectively nanotechnology, but assembled by fermentation things. So what role does that play? Do you expect to have those kinds of startups? Do you already have them? What role is that? And I'm imagining that you've got Rigetti a few blocks away from here, which is a quantum computing startup, and they obviously would have something to do with how you could actually simulate these kinds of things in our lifetimes versus classical computing. So I'm just curious about how all that stuff plays in terms of material science, but built with nature.
Thanks for the question. I don't know if the panel wants to respond to this. If you guys have thoughts about it, please jump in. I have some thoughts as well.
I can jump in. SynBio Beta, I think, is a really phenomenal organization. It's something that we personally have not had time to really get engaged with, but I have worked with Nucleate, which is, I'd say, it's closely affiliated. And so I think, and I'm really excited to see the spread of those, I would say, more Boston-based organizations coming out here to the Bay Area finally. I'm really excited. I know a number of people are going through Nucleate's program that started here at Berkeley, and I think that's a really exciting development here. And I'm excited to start taking advantage of those. And I would argue that there are a lot of companies here that are on the micro version of that materials question. Our approach is using natural enzymes to build molecules. We're structures, but we're building, we're assembling from it's a very engineering question of how you assemble therapeutics, complex biotherapeutics, and I think even the cultured meats are, in their own way, a form of that. I think your question was more towards the, what I would consider low margin type of materials, and I think that for many people, the obvious place to start right now is in a more healthcare focused thing, but for us, for example, we see a lot of potential in our technology for building tools for plastic degradation and other more consumer focused items. But we have consciously chosen to start with the higher margin field that will give us the funding to develop this technology while we bring the cost down.
For my industry, the alternative protein industry. We are very well integrated. It's a great meeting opportunity for us at the conference to meet new partners and see what the state of the art is with other synbio companies. When it comes to the material science, we look at meat not just as a biological product, but as a product that has its own material properties. So material science actually plays an enormous role in us creating our products. We have to create the right textures of the meat products. So we have to find the right materials for that, edible materials, plant-based, as well as cell-based.
I'll just say one word or a couple words also in response, and then please I would like to get back to any questions you may have. So we screen companies every month. Last month we heard a couple of traditional synbio companies, and we're inviting one of them to join actually from the East Coast. Kind of in that traditional space, we will actually be hosting that. It is absolutely in scope. And what is also in scope really is a sustainability challenge for Baker Labs. So we are on the active search for those kinds of companies that really can help with climate-associated challenges. And obviously, sustainable foods is clearly a key piece of that already. So we're already playing a role there. Other questions?
Hi. My name is Maria Honorado. I'm the Foreign Investment Program Manager for the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. So I hear from a lot of international startups that are looking to put down roots in the Bay Area. And you've shared such wonderful insight about how important the ecosystem is, the networking opportunities, the happy hours. One question I get all the time is just kind of mechanically, how do you get in front of investors? I'm sure there's a lot of different answers, but I'm wondering if you have any insights on starting that out, especially if you're new to the community and don't necessarily have a lot of connections yet.
I mean, I think tenacity is very, very important. I think researching people's backgrounds, looking at their prior investments, you have to be tenacious, but you have to target that energy. Otherwise, you're spreading too wide of a net. And looking for personal relationships. I think if I just look at my experience, my story, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I was calling my best friend from middle school's dad for advice, and introductions, right? So that's something where it's from growing up locally, that's a huge benefit. But when it comes to besides that one particular person, I think really doing background research on who you're talking to, what their prior investments are, do they have a personal interest? So for me, for example, I am really looking for investors that have funded creative cell therapy companies, but also investors who are living with type 1 diabetes or have a child with type 1 diabetes. And so that's how I'm doing my targeting. What about your mission will resonate with these people, and then what differentiates you? I think that will go a long way.
I moved here from Ohio. Ohio does not have the same ecosystem for biotech startups my suggestion would be to find a landing pad, which is likely an incubator space, like this one. Find a place that is offering lab space, that is offering mentorship. Many of them also provide introductions to VCs and will do training with the entrepreneurs for how to engage with VCs, how to step into that entrepreneurial mindset. That would be my best advice. There's a lot of resources that are in this ecosystem, and identifying the ones that are going to get you into the door will be the biggest key for companies coming overseas. Once you have your foot in the door and let's say you're at an incubator and you've started meeting with VCs, you really just have to start building your network as much as possible, because chances are you don't know a lot of the VCs here. So meeting with VCs and then asking for introductions. At the end of a meeting with one VC, whether or not they're going to fund you, ask for an introduction to another VC.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add on to that is, you have to be careful with those VC introductions, because if a VC is not gonna invest in you, like, and they know it already, if they're introducing you to another VC, it can kind of backfire. We've definitely experienced that once or twice. I would say the only piece on top of that is I think the standard approach, particularly for people that are new to the space, is just, everyone always says it's grind, just send out emails, and the trick is quality. Like, as you said, doing your research on the investor and understanding what they value is really the important piece. And building legitimacy is not just getting the big brand name investor. It's talking to someone could be an advisor for your company, who can then introduce you to investors, and building that network of legitimacy through the people that you're talking to and are buying into your technology. That's where you start, and then once you have that network, then you're going to have a much higher success rate going to different venture funds.
This basically concludes our panel. So I want to thank Jess and Katie and Marco for your tremendous insights. I know you're incredibly busy. You have to jet off to the next thing. That is what CEOs do today. So thank you very much.